Ahaz, bad to the bone. You can find the story of Ahaz's life in the Bible in 1 Kings chapter 16 and 2 Chronicles chapter 28. Ahaz was a king of Judah who was preceded and followed by kings called Jotham and Hezekiah, who largely followed God, but he certainly did not. He reigned for 16 years, some of which were almost certainly as co-regent with his father and or his son. And at the time of his reign, his nation was under pressure from the surrounding nations. The northern kingdom of Israel was effectively a vassal state of Assyria by this time, but that did not stop its king Pekah from making an alliance with Aram and attacking Judah. The Bible is clear that because of Ahaz's wickedness and idolatry, Judah was roundly defeated by these nations, and many of its people were taken off to Israel in slavery. The Philistines and Edomites also moved in battle against Judah from the south at this time, so it was under attack from both directions. After the intervention of a prophet called Oded, under God's direction, the Israelite leaders were persuaded to allow those they had captured from Judah to return there freely, so Judah was spared total ruin. However, instead of thanking God for this reprieve, Ahaz fully threw in his lot with the Assyrians, asking them for protection and taking on the worship of their gods. Presumably, Ahaz saw the success of the Assyrians, who were the superpowers of the time, as being down to the influence of their local deities, and so decided it was best to be with them. He decided to travel to Assyria and take some idols back with him to Jerusalem, even setting one up in a room in the temple for public worship. Ahaz decided at this point to effectively close the temple to the people, keeping the original sanctuary as his personal altar, while allowing the worship of the Assyrian idols to the people. It seems in the account in 2 Chronicles 28 that he also took on the worship of the idols of Aram after they had defeated him in battle, as well as the now customary practice of the idolatrous Jewish kings of burning incense to the Canaanite fertility god Baal. Ahaz also took part in the most wicked of religious practices of the time, that of child sacrifice, even going so far as to murder one of his own sons, a practice that would be taken up even more enthusiastically by his grandson Manasseh. It was not as though Ahaz didn't have any godly influence or people in his life. Presumably the scrolls of the law were available to him, as was the verbal rehearsing the Israelites used to do to memorize the law of Moses and history of their people. Isaiah, the great prophet, was in his heyday at this time, and we know from the book of his name that he had several interactions with Ahaz, where he pleaded with him on God's behalf to turn from his wicked ways and to listen to and take heed of godly advice. Ahaz turned to anyone and anything but the living God himself. He left the kingdom weak and helpless, vulnerable to further attack, and reliant on the Assyrians, who had already been duplicitous enough to answer Ahaz's pleas for help with an unprovoked attack on Jerusalem, the result of which was their pilfering of all manner of treasures from the temple, the king's palace, and from the wealthy and influential in the land. Yet even in spite of these setbacks, Ahaz remained unrepentant and unyielding to the God who had given the land to him and his people, and his name is one that is synonymous with evil and rebellion against God, even if he doesn't quite share the infamy of Ahab and Jezebel, who had earlier reigned in the northern kingdom. Perhaps his evil is overlooked when compared to them and to his grandson Manasseh, but he certainly had a hand in the eventually inevitable loss of the land by his people, and living under him as a committed servant of the God of Israel would have been both difficult and dangerous. So how can we learn from Ahaz's life? To think about. Ahaz was unrepentant even after all manner of warnings and setbacks. It's surprising how often people refuse point blank to question why things are going wrong in their lives. Of course, not all suffering and setbacks are down to people's sin or rebellion against God, but it is always worth analysing our lives when things do go wrong and checking if we have made an error or gone down a bad path. The book of Proverbs in the Bible is full of warnings about how living an evil life often leads to self-destruction. For example, in Proverbs 13 verse 21, trouble chases sinners while blessings reward the righteous. It also predicts that many will both refuse to listen to God and hate the thought of him. In Proverbs 14 verse 2 it says, "Those who follow the right path fear the Lord. Those who take the wrong path despise him." No matter what happened, Ahaz wasn't going to take God's counsel or submit himself to God's authority. So how can we avoid these pitfalls? The first step is not allow ourselves to become proud. Pride prevents us from being able to listen out for God's voice and also stores up his judgment against us. The Apostle Peter quoted a verse in the book of Proverbs when he said, "For God opposes the proud but favours the humble." 1 Peter 5 verse 5. The second step to avoid these pitfalls is to honestly evaluate ourselves and be ready to turn from wrongdoing so that we can do God's will and live the lives he has set out for us. That will not immunise us from difficulty or hardship, but it will mean we avoid some of the heartache and pain from suffering the consequences of our sinful actions. Ahaz had warnings and influences from Isaiah. This godly influence on him was sadly ineffective though. That is not a reflection on Isaiah, who no doubt was faithful in giving the messages he received from God to Ahaz. Rather, it's down to Ahaz's stubborn and prideful refusal to listen. He always thought he knew best, and the only way to change his course was to force him to do so in a way that God doesn't do, as he desires that we willingly follow him. The Assyrians were under no such limitation and forced Ahaz to give a lot of his power, possessions and authority over to them, but that certainly will not have been a voluntary decision on his part. It's a sad indictment on Ahaz that even the Israelite tribal leaders were moved to listen to reason and right direction when challenged by a prophet to release their prisoners of war. These were people who lived in a more apostate nation which had long since turned away from God and would likely have had little influence or knowledge of the things of God accessible to them. Yet they were far quicker to do the right thing than the stubborn and rebellious Ahaz. We can listen and change our ways in season when the ramifications won't be too damaging for us, or we can wait until there is no longer an option. We can wait until God's judgment and discipline are upon us. It is far better to have a short account with God, so we don't wander away too far where the consequences might be more drastic. Let us endeavour to be wise in this matter. Ahaz wasn't above pious excuses which might have sounded good to his hearers, but actually masked a complete unwillingness to order his life and his kingdom under God's direction. One such occasion occurs in Isaiah chapter 7. Isaiah is sent by God to speak a prophecy over Ahaz, which is remarkably gracious and favourable given his lifestyle and attitude. "But this is what the sovereign Lord says. This invasion will never happen, it will never take place. For Syria is no stronger than its capital Damascus, and Damascus is no stronger than its king Rezin. As for Israel, within 65 years it will be crushed and completely destroyed. Israel is no stronger than its capital Samaria, and Samaria is no stronger than its king Pekah, son of Remaliah. Unless your faith is firm, I cannot make you stand firm." Later, the Lord sent this message to King Ahaz. "Ask the Lord your God for a sign of confirmation, Ahaz. Make it as difficult as you want, as high as heaven or as deep as the place of the dead." But the king refused. "No," he said, "I will not test the Lord like that." Then Isaiah said, "Listen well, you royal family of David. Isn't it enough to exhaust human patience? Must you exhaust the patience of my God as well?" That's Isaiah 7 verses 7 to 13. Ahaz sounds here like he's being godly. He even paraphrases a command in the law of Moses about not testing God from Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 16. This may suggest he was aware of this teaching, which makes his actions even more inexcusable. Simply put, Ahaz was willing to say anything to avoid listening to godly words of wisdom. Isaiah's response to it makes it clear that he was frustrated with Ahaz and that what he had said was not godly at all, but rather it masked a continued stubborn rebellion against God. Indeed, this positive prophecy was quickly followed by one which foresaw the damage that would be done to Judah by the Assyrians once they had overrun Syria and Israel and turned their attention to Judah. It's very dangerous to say we are acting on God's behalf when in fact we are acting for ourselves. In fact, that is a sort of blasphemy or a taking in vain of God's name, which breaks the third of the 10 commandments found in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5. God will not be mocked by such a disingenuous display of faith, and we would do well to be careful with how we use our words, particularly with regard to statements we make about who God is. Because he is, after all, the King of Kings and the Judge of all.